The moment the first note left his lips, the entire auditorium froze, and by the time he finished, Simon Cowell wasn't judging anymore, he was smiling like a man who had just witnessed history. But before we step onto that stage, before the lights and the applause, stay with me, because this story isn't just about a performance. It's about a dream that refused to die. And if you believe in impossible dreams, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this deserve to be heard. In a small coastal town in the Philippines, where the air smelled of salt and jeepney smoke and evenings were filled with karaoke drifting from open windows, lived a skinny 12-year-old boy named Mateo Reyes. Mateo wasn't the loudest kid in school. He wasn't the tallest. In fact, most people barely noticed him. His uniform was always slightly faded, his shoes worn at the edges. But what most people didn't know was that inside his tiny chest lived a voice far older than his years, a voice shaped by vinyl records and stories from a grandfather who believed in music more than anything. Mateo's grandfather, Lolo Ernesto, had once worked overseas as a cruise ship janitor. One night, decades ago, he found an old record left behind by a tourist, an album by Elvis Presley. That record became his treasure. Every Sunday afternoon, when electricity was steady and the fan hummed lazily above, Lolo Ernesto would play Can't Help Falling in Love and close his eyes as if transported somewhere grander than their modest home. When Mateo was 6, he began sitting beside his grandfather during these sessions. He didn't understand the English lyrics at first, but he felt something, the tremble, the soul, the ache in every note. One day, while Lolo Ernesto was cooking in the kitchen, Mateo picked up a plastic spoon, stood in front of the cracked mirror, and sang. He didn't imitate. He embodied. His small frame carried a depth that startled even himself. Lolo Ernesto stood frozen in the doorway. "Anik," he whispered, tears forming, "you have his fire." But dreams in Mateo's town didn't usually stretch beyond survival. His father drove a tricycle 12 hours a day. His mother sold homemade rice cakes outside the school gates. Music was beautiful, but it didn't pay bills. When Mateo said he wanted to audition for an international talent show, his father's silence was heavier than any argument. "Anik, those shows, they're for rich kids. For kids with connections." Mateo nodded, but the dream didn't leave. At school, classmates teased him. They called him Lolo Jr. because he sang old songs instead of modern pop hits. One afternoon during a talent show rehearsal, a group of boys mimicked him dramatically, shaking imaginary hips and laughing. Mateo locked himself in the bathroom and stared at his reflection. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was ridiculous, a scrawny Filipino kid trying to revive a legend from another continent and another era. That night, he didn't sing. Lolo Ernesto noticed the silence immediately. He sat beside Mateo on the bamboo bench outside their home and handed him the old record. "Do you know why Elvis was different?" he asked softly. "Because he didn't sound like anyone else. He felt like himself. And people laughed at him too." Mateo swallowed. "But what if they're right about me?" His grandfather placed a wrinkled hand over his chest. "Then let them be wrong loudly." Months later, through a viral video recorded on a borrowed phone, a simple clip of Mateo singing at a barangay fiesta, an opportunity arrived. A regional producer saw the clip and encouraged him to audition for an international competition in front of judges that included none other than Simon Cowell. The thought alone was terrifying. Simon was known for his sharp tongue, his brutal honesty. The family didn't have money for plane tickets. Mateo's mother sold extra batches of rice cakes. His father worked double shifts. Neighbors donated small bills folded tightly with hope. The town that once laughed now whispered prayers. The day of the audition felt unreal. The stage lights were blinding. The audience buzzed with anticipation. Mateo stood backstage wearing a simple white suit his mother had stitched together from fabric bought on clearance. His hair was slicked back carefully, just like the old photographs of Elvis his grandfather kept in a small tin box. When his name was called, the applause was polite but curious. The judges glanced at their papers. Simon leaned back, eyebrows slightly raised. "What will you be singing today?" Simon asked. Mateo's voice trembled. "A song by Elvis Presley, sir." A few people in the audience chuckled softly. A child singing Elvis? The band prepared. The first chord rang out. Mateo closed his eyes, not to escape, but to remember. He thought of Sunday afternoons. Of cracked mirrors. Of his grandfather's trembling hands lowering a needle onto vinyl. Then he sang. The tone was rich. Controlled. Emotional without being forced. It wasn't an imitation, it was a conversation across generations. The auditorium shifted. Conversations stopped. Phones slowly lowered as people realized they were witnessing something rare. By the second verse, Simon had leaned forward. By the chorus, his lips were twitching upward. Not mocking. Not skeptical. Smiling. Mateo moved slightly, a subtle sway of the hips, respectful yet confident. His voice climbed effortlessly into the final note, holding it just long enough to silence the room completely before releasing it like a prayer. For 2 full seconds, there was nothing. Then the explosion. The audience rose to their feet. Some clapped above their heads. Others wiped tears. One of the female judges placed her hand over her heart. Simon shook his head slowly, but he was laughing softly, the kind of laugh that says, "I did not expect that." When the noise finally settled, Simon spoke. "I've heard thousands of singers attempt Elvis," he began. "Most of them are karaoke impressions. But you made it your own." He paused, his smile widening. "And you made me smile. That's not easy." Mateo felt his knees weaken. "You remind people why these songs still matter," Simon continued. "And more importantly, you remind us that talent doesn't care where you're from." For yes votes came swiftly. But it wasn't just about advancing in the competition. It was about validation. About a boy from a small Filipino town proving that authenticity travels further than imitation. Back home, the entire barangay gathered around a single television to watch the broadcast. When Mateo received the judge's praise, Lolo Ernesto wept openly, clutching the old record against his chest. As the competition progressed, challenges grew harder. Vocal strain. Homesickness. Online critics claiming he was too niche or too old-fashioned. But each time doubt crept in, Mateo remembered his grandfather's words, "Let them be wrong loudly." He began blending subtle Filipino vocal runs into classic arrangements, honoring both Elvis and his roots. The fusion created something new, a bridge between cultures. Even when he didn't win the grand prize, he won something greater. Record producers approached him. Invitations poured in. Interviews asked about the skinny kid who made Simon Cowell grin like a proud mentor. In his final televised performance, Mateo dedicated his song to his grandfather. The camera cut backstage where Lolo Ernesto stood, frail but radiant, whispering every lyric. Years later, when people spoke about unforgettable auditions, they mentioned the moment a Filipino kid channeled Elvis Presley and made a notoriously tough judge beam with genuine joy. But those who truly understood the story knew it wasn't about channeling a legend. It was about believing that your voice, no matter how unexpected, deserves to be heard. If you're watching this and you feel small, unseen, or underestimated, remember Mateo. Remember that greatness can rise from the most unlikely corners. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because the next dream we share might be yours. Somewhere tonight, in a small house with open windows and music drifting into the humid air, a child is singing in front of a mirror. And maybe, just maybe, the world is getting ready to listen. The judges were ready to say no. The audience was ready to smile politely. But the second that small Filipino boy opened his mouth, time seemed to pause, and by the end of the song, Simon Cowell wasn't just impressed, he was glowing with a smile he couldn't hide. Stay with me, because this isn't just a talent show moment. This is proof that dreams don't care where you're born. And if stories like this inspire you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a reminder that impossible things happen every day. 14-year-old Daniel Cruz grew up in a crowded neighborhood outside Manila, where life moved fast and money moved slow. His family lived in a 2-room home with peeling paint and a tin roof that rattled every time it rained. His father worked construction when jobs were available. His mother washed laundry for neighbors to make extra pesos. Daniel shared a small mattress with his younger brother, and at night, when the world quieted down, he would put on cheap earphones and press play. But he wasn't listening to modern hits like the other kids his age. He was listening to Elvis Presley. Daniel first heard Elvis when he was 8 years old. A tourist visiting their area had left behind a cracked DVD of an old concert. Daniel found it in a second-hand shop bargain bin. For 10 pesos, he carried it home like treasure. That night, when the screen flickered to life, he saw the white jumpsuit, the confident stance, the electricity in every movement. But it wasn't the outfit that captured him. It was the emotion in the voice, powerful yet vulnerable. From that night on, Daniel practiced in secret. He didn't have a microphone, so he used a broom handle. He didn't have a stage, so he stood on a plastic chair. He studied every inflection, every breath, every subtle movement, but he didn't want to copy Elvis. He wanted to understand him. He wanted to feel what made those songs timeless. At school, Daniel was quiet. When classmates blasted trending pop songs, he stayed silent. Once, during a music class, he volunteered to sing. When he announced he'd perform an Elvis song, a few students laughed. "Isn't that music for grandparents?" one boy teased. Daniel's cheeks burned, but he sang anyway. When he finished, the classroom was quiet, not mocking quiet, but stunned quiet. Even the teacher blinked twice. Still, doubts followed him home. "Maybe they're right," he whispered to himself one night. "Maybe I don't belong in this generation." But something inside him refused to let go. Months later, a televised international talent competition announced auditions in Asia. One of the judges was the famously tough Simon Cowell. Daniel had seen clips of Simon online, blunt, direct, rarely impressed. The thought of standing in front of him made Daniel's stomach twist. His parents were hesitant. Travel was expensive. Rejection would hurt. But Daniel looked at them with a seriousness beyond his years. "If I don't try, I'll always wonder." Neighbors chipped in small amounts of money. An aunt lent him a slightly oversized blazer. His mother carefully styled his hair with inexpensive gel, smoothing it back with pride shining in her eyes. The audition hall was massive. Cameras hovered. Contestants with glittering outfits and powerful voices filled the backstage area. Daniel felt small in his simple black pants and white shirt. When his name was called, he stepped into the spotlight. Simon glanced at him, then at his card. "And what will you be singing?" Daniel swallowed. "A classic by Elvis Presley, sir." A ripple of curiosity moved through the crowd. The music began softly. Daniel closed his eyes for a split second and imagined the cracked DVD screen from years ago. Then he sang. The first note was deep, surprisingly deep. It wasn't forced. It rolled out smoothly, controlled and warm. The audience leaned forward. The band members exchanged quick looks. By the second verse, something shifted in the room. Daniel didn't overdo the gestures. He let the voice carry the emotion. His tone carried longing, strength, and innocence all at once. It felt familiar yet fresh. The camera cut to Simon. His expression changed. His usual skepticism softened. A small smile crept onto his face. By the time Daniel reached the chorus, Simon was nodding lightly, clearly enjoying himself. When Daniel held the final note, stretching it with controlled vibrato, the auditorium erupted. People stood up instinctively. One judge covered her mouth in disbelief. Simon laughed quietly, shaking his head. "You know what?" he said when the applause faded. "I was fully prepared to roll my eyes." The audience chuckled. But that was fantastic. Daniel blinked rapidly, trying not to cry. "You didn't impersonate him," Simon continued. "You respected him. And you made it current. That's very hard to do." 4 yes votes followed. But the journey didn't magically become easy. Online critics questioned whether an Elvis-style singer could stay relevant. Some said he was a novelty. Others said his style was outdated. Instead of changing completely, Daniel evolved. He blended subtle Filipino musical influences into classic arrangements. He added modern instrumentation while keeping the emotional core intact. Week after week, he proved that authenticity outshines trends. There were nights he felt overwhelmed. The competition was fierce. Vocal strain became a real threat. Once, backstage before a crucial performance, his voice cracked during rehearsal. Panic rushed through him. His mother held his hands. "Sing from here," she said, touching his chest. "Not from fear." That night, Daniel delivered one of his strongest performances yet. Not because it was technically perfect, but because it was real. As the finale approached, he reflected on everything: the tin roof, the teasing classmates, the borrowed blazer. He realized that whether he won or lost, he had already broken a barrier inside himself. In the final episode, he dedicated his performance to every kid who feels out of place for loving something different. When he sang, it wasn't just Elvis in his voice, it was courage. Simon stood up before the song even ended, clapping with genuine admiration. And that smile, the one that spread across his face, told the whole story. Daniel didn't just channel a legend. He reminded the world that music has no expiration date. Passion has no nationality. And dreams don't ask for permission. Even if you feel like your dream doesn't fit the current world, hold on to it. Trends fade. Authenticity lasts. So if this story moved you, if you believe that a kid from a small Filipino neighborhood can light up a global stage, hit like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because somewhere right now, another quiet dreamer is practicing in front of a mirror, waiting for their moment to make the world smile. Before he even sang a single word, Simon Cowell was already skeptical. Another young contestant. Another bold song choice. Another hopeful dream. But 3 minutes later, that same judge would be leaning forward, eyes shining, unable to stop smiling. And the reason? A Filipino kid who dared to bring the spirit of Elvis Presley back to life in a way no one expected. Stay with me until the end, because this story is about more than music, it's about courage, identity, and proving that even the quietest voice can shake the world. And if stories like this inspire you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a reminder that dreams are real. 13-year-old Rafael Rafa Mendoza grew up in a fishing village along the coast of Cebu. Every morning before school, he helped his father untangle nets by the shore. His hands were small but quick. The sea breeze carried salt into his hair, and sometimes, when no one was paying attention, he would sing into the open air, letting the waves carry his voice away. Rafa didn't grow up with fancy speakers or music lessons. What he had was an old radio that only worked when positioned at a certain angle. One late evening, while turning the dial carefully, he stumbled across a classic hits station. A rich, velvety voice poured through the static. It was powerful, emotional, magnetic. It was Elvis. Rafa didn't understand every English word, but he understood the feeling. The longing. The strength. The vulnerability hidden beneath confidence. He started listening every night, memorizing melodies by heart. Soon, he wasn't just listening, he was practicing. At school, Rafa was shy. He avoided attention. When classmates talked about becoming influencers, gamers, or basketball stars, Rafa kept quiet about his dream of singing songs from another era. Once, during a class performance, he nervously chose an Elvis song. When he finished, there was silence and then scattered laughter from the back row. "Why you singing old man music?" someone teased. That night, Rafa sat by the ocean alone. The laughter echoed louder than the waves. Maybe they were right. Maybe loving something different meant he would always stand out in the wrong way. But his grandmother, who raised him while his parents worked long hours, noticed the change. She found him quiet at dinner, staring at his plate. "You stopped singing," she said gently. "They laughed at me," Rafa admitted. She smiled softly. "People laugh at what they don't understand. But the ocean doesn't stop making waves just because someone complains about the noise. The words stayed with him. Months later, a televised international talent competition announced open auditions in Manila. The judging panel included the famously hard-to-impress Simon Cowell. Rafa had watched clips online: Simon's raised eyebrow, his blunt critiques, his rare but genuine smiles. The idea terrified him. But something inside whispered louder than fear: try. Rafa's family didn't have much money. His father hesitated at first. Traveling to Manila meant missing work. But when Rafa sang one evening in the living room, pouring his heart into every note, his father's eyes filled with tears he quickly wiped away. "We'll find a way," he said quietly. Neighbors contributed small amounts. A local tailor adjusted an old white blazer to fit Rafa's slim frame. His grandmother pressed it carefully the night before departure, smoothing every wrinkle like she was smoothing his doubts. The audition day was overwhelming. Bright lights. Cameras. Contestants with powerful belts and flashy outfits. Rafa felt small again, a village boy with a simple dream. When he stepped on stage, Simon glanced at him curiously. "And what are you singing?" Simon asked. Rafa swallowed. "A song by Elvis Presley." There was a ripple in the audience, a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The music began. Rafa closed his eyes for 1 second, imagining the ocean waves. Then he sang. The first note wasn't loud. It was controlled, warm, steady. It grew stronger with each phrase. His voice carried depth that didn't match his age. It wasn't an imitation. It was respect mixed with identity. He added subtle Filipino tonal inflections, giving the song a new heartbeat. The room shifted. Simon's posture changed. He leaned forward. His lips slowly curved upward. By the chorus, Rafa wasn't just performing, he was connecting. The vulnerability in his voice silenced every whisper. It felt as though time folded, bringing the past into the present. When he reached the final note, he didn't force it. He let it soar naturally, holding it just long enough for the emotion to land. Silence. Then thunderous applause. The audience rose to their feet. One judge wiped tears away. Rafa stood frozen, heart racing, unsure if it was real. Simon laughed softly, shaking his head in disbelief, but he was smiling widely. "You know," Simon began, "when you said Elvis, I thought, oh no, here we go." The audience chuckled. "But that was beautiful. You didn't try to be him. You were you. And that's why it worked." Rafa's eyes filled with tears. "You have something special," Simon continued. "And you made me smile. That doesn't happen often." 4 yes votes. Back in Cebu, the entire village crowded around a small television at the sari-sari store. When Rafa received his praise, cheers echoed down the shoreline. But the competition only got tougher. Critics online questioned whether his style could last. Some called him retro. Others suggested he modernize completely. Instead of abandoning his love for Elvis, Rafa evolved thoughtfully. He blended modern instrumentation with classic melodies. He honored tradition while embracing innovation. There were difficult moments: vocal strain, homesickness, pressure. One night before a crucial performance, he doubted himself again. His grandmother called him from Cebu. "The ocean is still making waves," she reminded him. That performance became his breakthrough. He sang not to impress, but to express. And once again, Simon stood up before the applause even ended, clapping with that unmistakable smile. Rafa didn't just channel a legend. He proved that authenticity travels across oceans. That being different isn't weakness, it's identity. That even a boy from a small fishing village can light up a global stage. He may not have won the grand prize, but he won something far greater: belief in himself, and the respect of millions who saw their own hidden dreams reflected in his courage. So if you're watching this and you feel out of place for loving something uncommon, remember Rafa. Remember that your uniqueness is your power. The world doesn't need another copy. It needs you. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because somewhere right now, another quiet dreamer is singing into the wind, and their moment to make the world smile might be closer than they think. The crowd expected a cute performance. The judges expected confidence, maybe even talent. But no one, absolutely no one, expected the first note to sound like it carried decades of soul. And when the camera cut to Simon Cowell, something rare happened. The toughest judge in the room couldn't stop smiling. Not a polite smile. Not a surprised smirk. A genuine, uncontrollable smile. But to understand why that moment mattered so much, you have to go back to where it all began. And if stories about impossible dreams coming true inspire you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because the next story might be the one that changes your life. In a narrow alley in Quezon City, where laundry lines crisscrossed above and the scent of fried garlic drifted from open windows, lived a 15-year-old boy named Nico Alvarez. Nico was the kind of kid most people overlooked. Thin shoulders. Shy eyes. A quiet walk. He didn't speak unless spoken to. But when he sang, everything changed. Nico discovered Elvis Presley through his mother. She worked night shifts at a small hospital and often came home exhausted. To unwind, she played old music from her phone while cooking dinner. One evening, Elvis's voice filled their small kitchen. Nico stopped mid-step. "What is that?" he asked. His mother smiled. "That's real music." That night, Nico searched for more. He watched old performances, studied the posture, the breath control, the emotional delivery. But what fascinated him most wasn't the fame, it was the vulnerability. Elvis sang like he meant every word. Nico began practicing quietly when no one was home. He would stand in front of the electric fan pretending it was a stage breeze. He used a hairbrush as a microphone. He worked on tone, not volume. Feeling, not flash. At school, Nico struggled socially. He wasn't athletic. He wasn't loud. He didn't fit into the popular circles. When classmates shared trending songs, he stayed quiet. Once, during a music activity, he volunteered to sing. "I'll perform an Elvis song," he said softly. A few students laughed. One whispered, "Isn't that for old people?" The laughter stayed with him longer than the applause that followed his performance. Yes, there had been applause, stunned, hesitant, but real. Still, doubt is louder than clapping when you're 15. Months later, auditions opened for a global talent competition. The judging panel included the famously honest Simon Cowell. Nico had seen enough clips online to know Simon didn't fake reactions. If he hated something, you'd know. If he loved something, you'd know even more. Nico hesitated. His family wasn't wealthy. His father drove a delivery van long hours. Travel and preparation seemed unrealistic. But Nico's mother noticed something changing in her son, a quiet fire that refused to go out. "If you don't try," she told him one night, "you'll always sing with regret." They saved for months. His father picked up extra shifts. Nico practiced every evening. The judges thought they'd seen it all. The audience expected another good voice, maybe even a great one. But what happened next made the entire theater forget how to breathe. Because when a soft-spoken Filipino boy stepped forward and chose to sing a song by Elvis Presley, people prepared for nostalgia, not transformation. And yet, by the time the final note echoed through the auditorium, Simon Cowell wasn't critiquing, he was smiling in a way that said, "This is why I still do this." Stay with me until the end of this story, because it's not just about talent, it's about faith, rejection, courage, and the power of staying true to yourself. And if stories like this light a spark in your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a moment that reminds you dreams are possible. 17-year-old Marco Villanueva grew up in Davao City in a household where responsibility came before everything else. His father had passed away when he was 10, leaving his mother to raise 3 children alone. Money was always tight. Marco worked part-time at a small repair shop after school, handing tools to mechanics and sweeping floors for extra cash. Music wasn't considered practical in his home. It was something you listened to while working, not something you chased as a future. Marco discovered Elvis on an old USB drive given to him by a customer at the repair shop. "You like music?" the man had asked casually. "Listen to this. Real legend." That night, Marco plugged it into a borrowed speaker. The first song played, and something shifted inside him. The voice was powerful but emotional, commanding yet vulnerable. Marco replayed the track over and over. He began studying it the way he studied engines at work, carefully, patiently, learning every detail. But Marco didn't tell anyone about his new obsession. At school, most of his classmates were into modern pop and hip-hop. Singing old classics didn't exactly boost your social status. Still, he practiced in secret. Late at night, after everyone slept, he stood in their small living room and sang softly so he wouldn't wake his siblings. He worked on breath control. He watched old performance clips. He tried to understand not just how Elvis sang, but why. When Marco was 16, his school held a talent showcase. On impulse, he signed up. When he announced he would sing Elvis, a few students snickered. "Bro thinks he's from the 60s, someone whispered. Marco almost backed out. But when the music started, instinct took over. He sang with emotion that surprised even him. When he finished, there was stunned silence before applause erupted. For the first time, he felt seen. Months later, auditions opened for a major international talent competition. The panel included the famously direct Simon Cowell. Marco had watched enough online to know Simon valued authenticity above gimmicks. The audition required travel to another country. It seemed impossible. But Marco's mother, who had quietly listened to him practice for months, surprised him. "You sing like you mean it," she said one evening. "Your father would have liked that. We'll find a way." She took extra sewing jobs. Marco worked double shifts at the repair shop. Friends donated small amounts. It wasn't easy, but it was enough. The day of the audition felt overwhelming. The stage was enormous. Lights flashed. Producers moved quickly with headsets and clipboards. Contestants with big personalities filled the backstage area. Marco wore a simple fitted black suit borrowed from a cousin. His hair was neatly styled back. His hands trembled slightly as he walked onto the stage. Simon looked up, neutral expression. "What will you be singing?" Simon asked. "An Elvis Presley song," Marco replied, voice steady despite the nerves. There was a slight murmur in the audience. It was a bold, risky choice. The music began. Marco closed his eyes briefly and thought of his mother sewing late into the night. Of the repair shop grease on his hands. Of the whispers at school. Then he sang. The first note was low and warm, controlled with surprising maturity. The audience shifted forward. By the second line, you could feel something building, not volume, but emotion. Marco didn't exaggerate movements. He stood grounded, letting the lyrics carry weight. His voice swelled naturally into the chorus, powerful yet sincere. The camera cut to Simon. At first, he looked analytical. Then his expression softened. His lips curved upward slightly. By the time Marco reached the bridge, Simon was nodding, a genuine smile forming across his face. When Marco hit the final sustained note, holding it confidently before releasing it gently, the theater exploded into applause. People stood. One judge clapped above her head. Marco stood still, heart racing. Simon leaned toward his microphone, still smiling. "You know what I like?" Simon began. "You didn't try to copy him. You respected him. And you brought something of yourself into it." He paused. "That was really, really good." Marco blinked rapidly, holding back tears. "And I have to say," Simon added with a grin, "you made me smile. That's not easy." 4 yes votes. But the competition wasn't a straight road. Online criticism appeared. Some viewers said he was too traditional. Others urged him to switch genres completely. Marco faced doubt again. Should he change who he was to stay relevant? Instead, he chose growth without abandoning his foundation. He experimented with modern arrangements while keeping the soulful core intact. He trained harder. He learned stage presence. He strengthened his vocals. There were setbacks. One week, he forgot part of a lyric during rehearsal. Another time, vocal fatigue threatened his performance. But each obstacle reminded him why he started, not for approval, but for expression. In one live episode, he dedicated his performance to his late father. As he sang, emotion filled every word. The camera cut to his mother in the audience, tears streaming down her face. Simon stood up mid-applause that night. Marco didn't win the entire competition. But record labels reached out. Music producers offered collaborations. Most importantly, he returned home not as a mechanic's assistant, but as someone who proved that passion and persistence can break barriers. Years later, people would replay that audition clip, the moment a young Filipino mechanic walked onto a global stage and made Simon Cowell beam with pride. Marco's journey teaches something powerful: your background does not limit your future. Your circumstances do not define your ceiling. You don't have to erase your influences to be original. You just have to be honest. So if you're watching this and you feel like your dream is impractical or outdated or too different, remember Marco. Remember that courage often looks quiet before it looks victorious. If this story inspired you even a little, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because the next time someone tells you your dream doesn't fit the world, maybe you'll be the one who makes the world smile instead. The audience expected a sweet voice. The judges expected confidence. But no one expected the first note to feel like it had traveled through time itself. And when the camera cut to Simon Cowell, something almost never seen happened. He leaned back in his chair, eyes shining, smiling like he just rediscovered why he fell in love with music in the first place. But this moment didn't begin on a stage. It began in a tiny home where a dream sounded too old-fashioned to survive. Stay with me until the end, because this story isn't just about a performance, it's about proving that your passion doesn't have an expiration date. And if stories like this move you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a reminder that greatness can come from anywhere. 16-year-old Andre Santos grew up in a modest neighborhood in Bacolod. His house was small, painted in fading blue, with a roof that rattled when typhoons rolled in. His mother ran a small carinderia, cooking meals before sunrise. His older sister worked part-time while studying. Andre helped wash dishes, deliver food orders, and clean tables. Music, for him, was escape. One evening, while helping his mother close the carinderia, an elderly customer requested a song on the old radio near the counter. Moments later, a voice filled the room, deep, rich, emotional. It was Elvis Presley singing with a kind of sincerity Andre had never heard before. He froze mid-step. "What song is that?" he asked. The old man smiled. "That, hijo, is Elvis. The King." That night, Andre searched for more songs using slow internet on his sister's phone. He watched grainy clips of performances. He noticed the confidence, yes, but more importantly, the vulnerability. Elvis didn't just perform. He felt. Andre began practicing quietly at night. He didn't try to mimic the accent or the swagger. Instead, he focused on tone, emotion, storytelling. He imagined what the lyrics would mean if they were his own. At school, Andre wasn't popular. He was polite, quiet, average in grades. When friends blasted modern hits, he listened silently. One afternoon during a classroom activity, students were asked to sing their favorite song. Andre hesitated, then chose Elvis. The room went quiet, then a few laughs broke out. "Bro lives in the 60s, someone joked. Andre forced a smile and finished the song anyway. The applause was polite, but the laughter echoed louder in his mind. For weeks, he considered stopping. But one night, after a long day at the carinderia, his mother overheard him singing in the kitchen. She stood behind the curtain listening, eyes slowly filling with tears. "You sound different when you sing," she said softly when he finished. Andre looked embarrassed. "Different bad?" She shook her head. "Different strong." Those words stayed with him. Months later, auditions.